Today we're moving into Chapter 4, which focuses on bureaucratic organization. When you hear the word bureaucracy, you're probably thinking of red tape, long lines at the tag office, and frustrating government offices. But as we'll see today, bureaucracy is actually a sophisticated form of organization that has both significant advantages and notable drawbacks. We'll explore how bureaucratic organization emerged, how it works, and why it's become such a dominant force in modern society. Let's start by understanding what bureaucracy actually is and where it came from. Bureaucracy is a mode of organization that actually dates back to pre-industrial empires of Rome and dynastic China. So this isn't some modern invention. It's been around for thousands of years. In the pre-industrial world, bureaucratic tasks and responsibilities were quite specific. First, governments had to maintain control of their population. This was especially important when you're trying to govern territories hundreds or thousands of miles from the empire's capital. Second, they had to collect taxes. As our chapter notes, taxes were no more popular than they are today, but as former Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. said, taxes are the prices we pay for civilization. Third, bureaucracies were essential for keeping written records, and it's no coincidence that the first extensive government bureaucracy emerged in places like Egypt, Babylonia, and China, where written languages were first developed. Finally, they organized public works, the roads, the aqueducts, the buildings that made the civilizations possible. What is interesting is that these early bureaucracies provided much of the financial support for the art, architecture, literature, and philosophy that remain as enduring cultural legacies of these long-gone civilizations. To understand modern bureaucracy, we need to look at Max Weber, a German sociologist who lived from 1864 to 1920. Weber presented the major components of modern bureaucratic organization and studied the cultural values and philosophies that gave rise to these bureaucracies. Weber created what he called an ideal type. This is a mental construct that outlines the key features of a social phenomenon. It is important to understand that Weber knew real bureaucracies do not perfectly match this ideal type, just like a mathematical formula for a falling body first sets aside air resistance to derive the basic principle. So Weber devoted considerable attention to the cultural values that gave rise to modern bureaucracies. He saw bureaucratic structures as reflecting what he called rationality, the dominant way of thinking in modern society. By rationality, Weber meant what he called the disenchantment of the world, the ability and willingness to explain events without invoking supernatural agents. Instead of blaming crop failures on angry spirits, rational people look for plant diseases and material causes. Weber identified three key social values that underpin bureaucratic organization. First is rationality, the ability to use logic and empiricism to explain the causes of events rather than invoking supernatural agents, and the effective and efficient pursuit of goals without regards to means. Weber made an important distinction between formal and substantive rationality. Formal rationality focuses on quantitative calculation and efficiency, while substantive rationality considers whether the goals themselves align with ethical values. The second value is impersonality, the equal treatment of all. This might seem cold and unfeeling, but it also means that race, gender, ethnicity, and other personal characteristics shouldn't influence how you're treated by a bureaucracy. The third value is meritocracy. There is an emphasis on merit and expertise in the assignment of job positions and work tasks. In traditional China, for example, government officials called mandarins were selected based on their performance in official examinations, testing their knowledge of Confucian classics. Today, we see this in civil service exams and job-specific tests. Let's look at the 7 key characteristics that define a bureaucracy according to Weber. We have impersonality and meritocracy, which we just discussed. Then there's division of labor. Unlike simple societies, industrial societies have enormous variety of occupational specialties. The U.S. Directory of Occupational Titles lists over 842 occupational categories with 30,000 distinct job titles, including things like emulsification operator and pickling grader. We also see specialization of task, which goes hand in hand with the division of labor. Adam Smith famously wrote about pen manufacturing, where instead of one worker doing everything, the process was divided into 18 separate operations. One worker cut wire, another sharpened points, another soldered heads, and so on. Next are formal rules, regulations, and procedures. What people typically think of when they hear of bureaucracy. All bureaucracies use Standard Operating Procedures, or SOP, to guide and control activities. While this can be frustrating, it also prevents corruption and arbitrary decision making. We have hierarchies of authority. Most bureaucratic organizations can be depicted in an organizational chart showing who reports to whom. And finally, there's extensive use of written records, which are essential for preserving rules, contracts, tax records, and other important documents. This brings us to a crucial point. Bureaucracy isn't always the best form of organization. It's most useful when tasks performed by members can be reduced to routines, and when workers are not expected to use much creativity, innovation, or ability to solve unique problems. The perfect example is the Department of Motor Vehicles. Processing hundreds of thousands of vehicle registration applications each year is a daunting task, but it's already greatly facilitated by reducing the process to set procedures. The cost isn't negotiated for each vehicle, and the owner's social status doesn't matter. There's a set fee on clear criteria, like the vehicle's weight or purchase price. But bureaucracy is unhelpful when outcomes are unpredictable and tasks cannot be routinized. In cutting-edge scientific research, for example, scientists are exploring unknown territory where outcomes are unpredictable. A scientist might achieve a breakthrough next week, next month, or maybe never. Some important discoveries have occurred while looking for something completely different. That is serendipity, and you can't bureaucratize serendipity. Education provides another interesting case. Some aspects of education can be routinized. Children learn multiplication tables and grammar rules through drills and exercises. But many educational researchers believe that formal rules aren't well suited to education because the learning process is still only dimly understood, and what works for one student may not work for another. This brings us to a contemporary analysis of bureaucracy by sociologist George Ritzer, who coined the term McDonaldization. Ritzer uses McDonald's as a standard 21st century organization to describe contemporary bureaucracy and its consequences for working life. Ritzer argues that McDonaldization has gone well beyond fast food restaurants and now influences how we organize work across many different sectors. Just like Taylor's scientific method, management, and Ford's assembly line, McDonaldization represents a continuation of bureaucratic principles, but applied more broadly than ever before. McDonaldization represents four features of work operations. First is efficiency, doing things in the fastest, most economical way possible. Second, calculability, emphasizing quantity over quality, focusing on things that can be counted and measured. Third is predictability, ensuring that products and services are the same everywhere and at all times. And fourth is control of people through the use of specific technologies, replacing human judgment with machines and predetermined procedures. Think about McDonald's. The food is prepared using technologies that require very little judgment, like dispensers that always supply exact quantities of ketchup and cash registers that tell cashiers how much change to give. There are even prepared scripts that workers use when interacting with customers, and the Bible, an exhaustive manual covering all procedures and standards. What is remarkable is that McDonaldization is operative well beyond fast food chains. So we see this in retail businesses. Think about the standardized procedures at big box stores. We see it in schools with standardized testing, scripted curricula, and uniform procedures. The chapter even mentions that it's found in the sex industry, where standardization and routinization have been applied to once was a very personal service. Well, this shows how powerful these organizing principles have become in shaping modern world life across virtually every sector of society and the economy. Bureaucracy isn't the only way to organize work, and that brings us to alternatives. One important alternative is matrix organization, which organizes authority along both horizontal and vertical dimensions rather than the traditional top-down hierarchy authority. In a matrix organization, the exercise of authority is in a constant state of flux. You might have traditional vertical departments like sales, manufacturing, and personnel, but you also have horizontal working teams centered on a particular project or a geographical area. So an employee might report both to their department manager and a project team leader. A great example comes from the automotive industry with platform teams. In the 1980s, Chrysler used platform teams to develop three new vehicles: a sedan, an SUV, and a pickup truck. These teams included people from engineering, finance, styling, and even line workers and foremen to provide real manufacturing experience. Some managers and engineers quit because they saw their authority being eroded, but the approach worked. All three vehicles came in on time and within budget and became strong sellers. An even looser form of organization in what's called adhocracy. In an adhocracy, members are in a perpetual learning mode where feedback from the environment continuously influences their actions. There might be agreement on general goals, but no consensus on how to achieve them. So participants have to make it up as they go. Two excellent examples are the Linux open source computer operating system and Wikipedia. It's questionable whether these can even be described as traditional organizations. Both are fluid operations that allow inputs for large numbers of contributors with very little specialization and hierarchical control, but they both work. Linux is widely used as an alternative to a commercial operating system, and Wikipedia contains millions of articles consulted by people every day. These examples show that under certain circumstances, very loose, flexible organizational forms can be remarkably effective. As we wrap up Chapter 4, I want you to think about the organizations you encounter in your daily life. Which ones exhibit classic bureaucratic characteristics? Where do you see McDonaldization in this action? And where do you see alternatives like matrix organization or adhocracy? The key insight from this chapter is that bureaucracy isn't inherently good or bad. It's a tool that works extremely well under certain circumstances and poorly under others. The challenge for modern organization is knowing when to apply bureaucratic principles and when to use alternatives. Bureaucracy has been essential to building the complex, large-scale organizations that characterize modern society. But as we've seen, a world run solely according to bureaucratic principles wouldn't work very well and certainly wouldn't be pleasant to live in. The shortcomings of bureaucratic organization are mirror images of its advantages. Rules and procedures prevent corruption, but it can lead to rigid thinking. Hierarchies coordinate work, but can stifle creativity and innovation. Impersonality ensures equal treatment, but can make people feel like numbers rather than individuals. As we continue through this course, you'll see how these tensions between bureaucratic efficiency and human needs continue to shape the modern workplace. The dilemmas and paradoxes of bureaucratic organization will be themes we return to repeatedly. That concludes our exploration of Chapter 4. Thank you for your attention, and I will see you next time as we dive deeper into how technology continues to reshape the world of work.